All right. So according to this, I'm live. If anybody jumps on here, that would be great. I don't know. YouTube seems to be struggling right now. I don't know what's happening. Okay. Looks like we're up and running. I don't know if anybody watches this who was also watching yesterday. If you jump on, let me know that my audio is good. Yesterday I had major issues with my audio. I actually did like I think 10 minutes of podcast or live stream yesterday, and the audio was terrible on the whole thing. So hopefully my audio is better today. I think I cracked the code as to what was going on. Oh, thank you, Logan. I appreciate that. Logan Vorlachek. Thank you very much. I think I cracked the code. I think I figured out what the problem was. I had the mic. I had the mic running right into my phone as opposed to into the laptop. So my webcam isn't on my laptop. My webcam, I'm using my iPhone as the actual webcam, and I'm using a piece of wireless, an app to make it like work as a webcam. So I had my mic running directly into the phone, but it's sending the whole signal back over to the computer over my Wi-Fi. And I think the issue was that the sound wasn't coming across at the same rate as the video. And so it sounded, I don't know what the hell was going on. It was amazing though, because I went back and watched one I did like for 10 minutes. I'm in here rambling on, and somebody stuck with me like most of the time too, which is hilarious because it was horrible. I went back to edit it in YouTube Studio because I was like, well, hopefully this sounds all right. And I noticed how terrible the sound was. So now, anyway, I'm running my mic directly into the computer, and I think that is going to be the issue, especially if it's working now, because that's how I got it to work yesterday. So hopefully we don't have that issue again. But what are we here to talk about today? The mask fight that's going on in this country right now, right? Everybody's screaming and yelling, wear the mask, don't wear the mask. I'd love to get your guys' opinion on it. What you think? Should we be wearing a mask? Should we not be wearing a mask? Do you wear masks when you're out in public? I'm in South Carolina, so there's not a lot of mandate. One of the towns near me actually has mandated that people have to wear the mask if they're out in public. But it doesn't seem like most of the stores are enforcing it. I moved here from Wisconsin, and when I was in Wisconsin, it seemed like way more people were not wearing masks, just ignoring it altogether. And I thought moving to South Carolina, which is a very red state, very Republican state, not that the science should depend on politics, but I thought moving to a red state, I'd see a lot of the same thing. I think down here, I see a lot more mask compliance and a lot more people actually wearing masks in public than I did up there. But people are heated on this thing, and it's all, you're going to kill grandma and grandpa. And, I mean, people saying, I hope somebody in your family gets it. It's just terrible stuff that's going on out there. So I wanted to do a little research, and realistically speaking, from a political perspective, you can find science to back essentially whatever you believe. I think we all know that now, right? If you think this, then I'll just go out and search science that backs that. If I think the other, then I'll just go out and find science that backs that. So, and none of us are scientists. None of us can really extrapolate from this data. It's over most of our heads. So at the end of the day, what do? Well, I remember a while back, I did a video on Sweden. And as you guys might know, Sweden did not do anything like we're doing. They didn't do lockdowns. They didn't do masks. They didn't do anything. They kept their elementary schools open. They closed down their high schools, but kept their elementary schools open. And for Sweden, it was pretty much business as usual. And at the beginning, Sweden was losing people way faster than the Scandinavian countries around it. Sweden was getting a lot of criticism because so many more people had died in Sweden than in Norway. And, so there was a lot of criticism around it. And I did a video then, and I said, yeah, I get it, but you can't hide from, this is when we went, I think this is right around the time we went into our lockdown. And I said, yeah, that's fine. You could criticize Sweden because they're losing people, but it's a virus. You can't hide from it. There's no immunity. There's no vaccine. So you can lock the doors and hide away all you want. But at the end of the day, it's going to be waiting for you when you come back out. And so I said, yes, Sweden's numbers are higher now, but let's see what happens down the road When they come back out, there's a good chance that they're going to be getting past this thing as we're heading into a next outbreak. I swear, you can go back into my videos. I don't know which one it was. I said pretty much those exact words, and it's exactly what's happening right now. So I got Sweden's information on the screen behind me because I have not yet figured out the technology of how to share my computer screen on the live stream yet. So I just put it here on the TV behind me. Let's see if I can get it to move. And of course, it locks up terrible for some reason. So there's your total coronavirus death numbers. Let me move this camera over just a tad. Is that better? That's better. All right. So there's your coronavirus case total, your total number of deaths. I don't know why there's an NA under recovery. I don't know if they're just not reporting their recovery numbers or what. But all right. So that's their total recovery numbers or whatever. So here's your active cases. It looks like it's backwards. So your active cases, 69,059 currently infected, 69 in mild condition. So 69,024 in mild condition, which means only 35 of the 60-some thousand cases are serious, that's amazing. And I think it speaks to the potency of this illness. And I think the exaggeration in terms of how dangerous this thing was. So you can see here on their total cases, this is where it starts peaking, right? You can see that they're heading into a plateau with total cases. And then let's see, as we scroll down, this is what I think, this is where they were getting all this criticism, right through here in terms of the lives lost. But you can see, even at the peak, you can see as it started to come down, right? It flattened out, and look where it is now. As of yesterday, no new deaths yesterday in Sweden. We don't have the numbers for today, but you can see that their death total, they're done. And you know, again, I'm not a virologist, I'm not an epidemiologist or anything like that, but they didn't lock down, they didn't do masks, they didn't do any of this stuff. There was none of this hysteria in Sweden like we have here. And it looks like they're done. Looks like they're coming out of this thing. No new deaths yesterday. Their cases are flatlining. It looks like the number of serious cases compared to the number of active cases, that tiny number means that they finally got it together and they're doing a better job protecting the elderly and the vulnerable in their community, which is probably why they have such a small number of serious cases. But now what? Sweden gets to go on life as normal. And people are still saying, you know, well, their death toll based on the number of their population is one of the highest in the world. Okay, I'll grant you that, but the rest of the world's not done yet. We're not done yet. Our deaths are climbing on a daily, and they're done. So we aren't going to know if Sweden was right or wrong in this until we get all the way to the end. But they are there. They're at the end, and guaranteed their economy is going to be in much better condition. You're going to have less depression, less substance abuse, all these other ancillary things that happen when you have an economic catastrophe of the size that we had. They're going to have a lot less of all that stuff. I think the CDC chief had come out and said that there have been more suicides than COVID deaths in some areas. I think Tennessee had more suicides than COVID-related deaths. I could do a quick search for that, but I remember hearing something like along those lines. Not to mention substance abuse. It's all these other terrible things that happen when you destroy an economy and take away people's church and people's gym and people's the structure that people live on. So I don't know. I mean, it sounds cold to say we have to let this thing run its course. It's going to go through our population. There's nothing you can do about it because it is a virus. There's not an immunity. And I'll tell you, I will wear a mask, but I will not be vaccinated. They've got this quasi untested vaccine coming out of Russia. They're rushing this vaccination process. I'm not going to do it. I will not be mandatory vaccinated. I will fight. They put me in jail. But that's aside, and let's just hope it doesn't come to that. But we've got to get to this point. We've got to get to the end here. And this is going to have to work its way through the population. That's just how these things work. It is a tragedy. I'm not saying it's not, but we can't destroy our economy and lock people down in this totalitarian nonsense that's going on. I don't know if you guys saw this, but in LA, the LA mayor is saying that he is going to cut power. See here, this is pretty, this one's easy to find. I remember this from the other day. Here, if I can get this up on the screen here. The mayor of LA threatens to, come on, get that ad nonsense out of here. Mayor of LA threatens to, why is that happening? Threatened to cut power and water to houses hosting parties after YouTube and TikTok stars kept gathering. So the mayor of LA essentially put out a blanket warning saying if you have a large get together, we're going to turn off your power and your water. I mean, that's insane. There's no definition of what a large get together is. There's no this many people, that many people. Is it a funeral? Is it, if you have a large gathering, we're going to come out, we're going to shut off your power. I've seen these reports where they're talking about, I think it was in Chicago. They said we could tell based on, 99% of people are following the rules, but there's the 1% of people out there based on cell phone data that show that they're not staying home and that they're socializing. You understand that's a government entity tracking your location to determine if you are obeying stay-at-home orders. I mean, this is completely out of hand, and you can't say that the risk of this virus, which we're learning pretty quickly, according to the CDC's numbers, this is the CDC is saying that there's probably 10 times as many people who are infected with this as active cases. So we're talking about 40 to 50 million people, somewhere between 40 and 50 million people in the United States of America have contracted this thing. We know that it's way, way less lethal than we thought. We're probably looking at I think the last week in July, the mortality rate on known cases was 1.17. If you divide that by 10, you're at 0.117, which means this thing is 99.89% survivable. This is a disease of a very low mortality, with a very low mortality rate. And we're converting into a totalitarian state to fight it. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. So I definitely think we've gone too far. So this started out as a conversation about masks. There's all this hate, there's all this anger about the mask and people not wearing masks. You're seeing these confrontations in public places. And to me, I'm saying, explain to me what is my risk to you? If you're going to take away my freedom and you're going to mandate that I behave in a certain way, to some extent, you have to be able to define what risk you're trying to avoid. First is, what are the odds that I don't have symptoms? I'm not coughing, I'm not sneezing. If I do, I do it into my hands. So the first thing you got to answer is, what are the odds that I'm even going to give this thing to you? I mean, if we're going to start fining people for not wearing masks, which is starting to happen in some places, people are being fined. I think it's a Class B misdemeanor in one place where you get a $200 fine. You have to be able to define, to some extent, some level of risk. I mean, you're not allowed to drive drunk. I'm with that. You can't be out on a public road exposing people to the risk of you being drunk. We've set a level. We've said if you're 0.08, that's when we feel your ability to drive is impaired, and you can't be on the road putting the public at harm's way. So there is a precedent for saying the government's going to intervene to protect the public good. I get that. But you can't tell me what my risk is to you if I'm not wearing a mask. If you hit me with a fine for not wearing a mask, then you should have to give me a test. And if I don't have COVID, then I wasn't presenting a risk to anybody, because it doesn't protect me, and government shouldn't be making me try to protect myself anyway. The mask doesn't protect me. The risk is that I'm going to spread it to somebody else. So if you're going to fine me for not wearing it, then you actually have to prove that I was actively a risk to somebody, that I had this sickness, right? Just like with a DUI, you can't say, I think you may be putting people at risk by driving drunk. I'm not going to test you. I'm not going to have you blow in the thing. I'm just writing you a DUI. And that's not how it works. You have to prove that I was actually a risk. Second is, then you have to determine what is the level of risk. If I don't have symptoms, and I wouldn't go out, if I were sick or had a fever, I'm coughing, sneezing, I'm not leaving the house. I'm not a jerk. I'm not going to put somebody at risk. So if I'm coughing, sneezing, whatever, I'm staying home. So I'm only out because I'm not showing any symptoms. So I'm not showing any symptoms. I am social distancing, and people are social distancing from me. What is the risk that I'm going to give this to? Like, how close do I have to be and cough, like what, directly in your face? What are the odds that me with no symptoms is actually going to infect somebody else, even if I do have it, if I'm asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic? Then the disease itself is incredibly survivable. So you have to take the odds that I'm asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. I'm still going to manage to spread the disease to somebody, and that disease presents a true and mortal threat to that person. I just think we're overreacting to the extent that like every crisis, every emergency that we face, government is using this as an excuse to grow their power. And you look at some of the things that are in place in this country since 9/11, NDA, Patriot Act, whatever the case may be, the mechanisms in place to control the American people to an extent that, and look, if I told you a year ago, this is where we'd be, that the government would be tracking your location on your phone to make sure you're obeying an order that says stay at home, that they're going to mandate that businesses are closed, they're going to force you to wear a mask, that there's real talk of mandated vaccines, you have told me I was a crazy conspiracy theorist. It's amazing how we got here. But this is where we are. And I think we need to start having honest conversations about, are we taking the right steps? And are we treating this thing like a virus that has to work its way through the population? Or are we just scaring people for the sake of scaring them and controlling them and hoping that they point at Trump and blame Trump for this, I guess, and then vote Democrat? I don't know. I'm not a Trump supporter, so I could care less on that aspect, but I don't know. Just doesn't seem, I don't know. It just doesn't seem to make sense what we're doing versus what this disease actually ends up being. Well, now that we know more about it. But the other thing I wanted to just hit on quick, and look at me, I'm already at 16 minutes. I'm very proud of myself. I told you I was going to try and do more of this live streaming stuff and try and get more comfortable with it. I'm reading Sowell's Basic Economics. It's an amazing book. Probably his most well-known work, I think. But here, I'm going to try and hold it up as a prop here, but I can't get it together. Here we go. So Basic Economics, Thomas Sowell. I do not have affiliate links. I don't make any money from trying to sell anything. You can see I have like no followers, subscribers or whatever at this point. So I'm recommending this book because it's amazing, not because I think you should buy it from an affiliate link of mine. This is an amazing work. And I am really starting to be disturbed by how much our youth in this country are getting sucked into the idea of a centrally planned economy. They're talking about communism and socialism. I know there's a lot of Marx out there who would say that that's not Marxism. Marxism is a cashless, stateless society, but to implement Marxism, you have to go through a state and you have to use force to get there. And we've seen what happens in, Stalin's Russia, Mao's China, and the example after example after example. But the interesting thing about Sowell is that he can defend capitalism while at the same time critiquing our current system. And he just uses some great examples this is the Rise and Fall of Business, chapter 5 or whatever, the Rise and Fall of Business. He just uses a few examples of companies that were at the absolute top of their game, like the A&P grocery store. It was the largest chain in the country. And he talks about how they were the largest chain in the country because they had the lowest prices. That makes sense, right? And then how things change, and you have the advent of the cars and refrigerators and freezers. And so people aren't walking to the grocery store anymore and getting an armful of groceries and carrying them back home. They're actually able to buy a week's worth or 2 weeks worth of food. And so A&P didn't adjust to those changes, and they got beaten out by bigger grocery stores that could deliver products even more efficiently, because it's cheaper to ring up one customer $100 worth of groceries than 10 customers $10 worth of groceries, right? It's cheaper to deliver to one large location than to 10 small locations. So A&P didn't change with the market, and they ended up getting beaten out. And I think a lot of people in this country have never even seen an A&P. Young people anyway, and I consider myself quasi-young. I'm in my 40s, but hey, I've never seen an A&P. So, and then I think Safeway was the next chain that really stepped up and became like this big grocery store chain. And eventually you saw them get beat out by Walmart, and Walmart found a better way to do things. And the consumer keeps winning in these circumstances as things keep getting cheaper. But the interesting thing about centrally controlled economies and the way that Sowell kind of breaks this all down is how pricing and profits signal to business to make changes. And that if a business doesn't make that change, it gets replaced by another business. And when we think about a centrally controlled economy, I know the argument for universal healthcare is going to come up because of this pandemic that we're going through right now. Government's not good at making decisions. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican, left, right, government's not good at making decisions. And when conditions change and resources need to be allocated in a different way, government is not quick to respond to those things. But worse, Government doesn't get replaced. So our public school system isn't functioning properly. It hasn't been for decades. Government's not able to change that. They're not able to respond to the changes in technology and all the different opportunities to educate kids in a better way. Government's not good at responding to that stuff. So what do? Everything kind of just stays the same. They draw their battle lines, it becomes partisan, and change becomes virtually impossible. And since government has a monopoly on the industries that it runs, like education, there isn't somebody else to come in and defeat them. So if the economy, you hear a lot of times, you don't want your government running like a business. People who talk about Donald Trump say, well, you can't run an economy, you can't run a government like it's a business. Okay, that's fair. Maybe that's a philosophical conversation for another time. But okay, but then you can't run business like a government. We want to get things to the consumer in the most efficient manner possible, and we want to respond to changes in social changes, technological changes. We want to be able to respond to that quickly and correctly. And if a bad decision is made, it should be punished, which it is. In the business world, it's punished. In the business world, you make a bad investment, you go bankrupt. And I'm going to get to corporate bailouts in a second too, so stick around for that. But you look at an A&P, they didn't adjust. Another industry came in, or another competitor came in. They adjusted. They saw what was going on in the marketplace. They adapted to it better. And in both circumstances, the consumer ends up winning because they're able to get their goods at a lower price. So that's the beauty of kind of this rise and fall of business as described in this chapter, where you let the business, the producers, the providers respond to demands in the economy and watch these changes and utilize that knowledge and insight to make adjustments. So the business keeps getting better and better and better, and you have this constant competition to provide value to the consumer. And if you fail to do so, you lose and you're out. Government obviously doesn't function that way, right? Government functions in perpetuity. I don't know a lot of people who would say our public education system is just fine. I think on the left, you're going to hear people say we need more money. Schools are underfunded, teachers are underpaid. So whether they love public education or not, they're pointing out there's some pretty significant flaws with public education in their opinion. People on the right would say, look, you got these kids locked in this system. Only wealthy people can afford to buy their way out, and people should be allowed to make a choice, but and they should be able to break free from that system, and school choice should be a thing. So both sides are seeing major flaws with the public education system. I think parents have their own frustration with public education, but it can't change. It can't look at new technologies and new ways to educate kids and adapt in any way that keeps up with the changing demands of the population and the changing opportunities that present itself, because it's government. So when we look at people are falling in love with these centrally controlled economic theories, and they want government to control more and more things, we have to look at the fact that economies run by political authorities. They have very little ability to change. You're watching it, you can see it every day. For God's sakes, watch CSNBC or any of these stations and watch these politicians argue with each other and then explain to me how they're going to work together to deliver what we need in an efficient manner and be able to adjust for changes. When was the last time you heard a politician stand up and say, I made a terrible mistake, we've got to change this? They don't do that. Politicians don't say that they're wrong. They say that this program needs more money and I'm going to come and take it from you. And there's nothing we can do about it. So I want the market to stay as free as possible in as many different areas as possible. And the other thing that we're seeing, and this is when you talk about the rise and fall of business and you talk about big chains going under and being replaced by more efficient, better entities that come into the marketplace and beat them out, government interference there, this is where corporate welfare comes into play. This is why we need to stop. We need to acknowledge that sometimes bad things happen in an economy, and we need to understand that sometimes people are going to lose jobs, and that's a process that an economy needs to go through as things change. We have to start accepting that as a society and stop saying, oh, we have to bail out all these companies. You're rewarding bad behavior and you're preventing efficiencies from coming into the marketplace, right? So we're bailing out right now. We're bailing out all these airlines. To me, this is a great example. We're bailing out all these airlines. They make billions of dollars a year. Now we have this situation where there's no air traffic. Nobody's traveling. They couldn't have seen this coming, but who knows what's going to happen? What after 9/11, that was how much air travel was there? Everything was grounded, right? So you look at these things and you go, we got to stop bailing out these businesses. You are a multi-billion-dollar corporation. You need to have cash set aside. These businesses get way in over their heads. They're undercapitalized. They don't have the cash reserves to see themselves through a rainy day, not because they're mismanaged. The people who run these businesses are making the absolute right decision. They're spending as much as they can and investing as much as they can to make as much money as they can. They keep investing because they know if there's an emergency, they're just going to be able to turn to the government and say, hey, the taxpayer is going to bail us out. They know that that's coming in advance. If they didn't think that was the case, then they would have cash reserves. They'd be in a position to survive for 6 months of capital, a year's worth of working capital. Maybe their executives don't get paid as much. Maybe they don't get to grow as much as they want to. Maybe Delta can't buy 4 planes this year. Maybe they can only buy 2 planes because they have to set a certain amount aside in their cash reserves, but they don't function that way because they know that in the end, the government's going to come and bail them out. Now, in an emergency like this, you may say that bailout's justified, but look at the auto industry. When the auto industry tanked, we bailed them out. That was mismanagement. That was the issue. And we still bailed them out. No, they should have been allowed to fail. They should have been chopped up, sold off. Their debt, the banks have to eat that for making a poor investment. The demand for automobiles wasn't going to go anywhere. They were just going to buy from people who were doing a better job getting automobiles to us efficiently. But we bailed these companies out, we propped them up, and that slows economic progress. And that's why it's terrifying that so many young people want government to start controlling more and more. And even, the left in general, it's not necessarily a young people thing. I'm on social media, so I interact with more young people. So I don't mean to sound condescending, old guy on the hill here, but we run into these people who think that government's going to do a better job running our healthcare and government's going to do a better job. There's no proof of that anywhere, not from inside our own economy when it comes to public schools and other government entities, how they choose to bail out businesses. And there's no proof of that around the world. There's never been a centrally controlled economic country, a country with a centrally planned economy that has performed as well as a free market economy, period. And nobody's ever tried to escape from a free market economy. Everybody can protest and talk about how bad the United States is. And I'm not one of those people who says, if you don't like it, get out. But nobody's leaving. Nobody's going anywhere. I know a bunch of pretty wealthy people who promised that if Trump won, they were going to move to Canada. They didn't move to Canada. So it's not perfect. We've got work to do. But stop pretending like we need to tear up the Constitution and end free market capitalism and return to an era of centrally planned economies. That's just ridiculous. So, well, hey, look, I've got about a half hour in. I'm pretty happy about that. I'm going to be back tomorrow. I think this is going to be my new format. It's just to get on here and go live. And I'm going to keep getting better at it, I promise. So if you enjoyed the content today, please share it. Turn on the notifications so you know when I'm getting on. And yeah, I don't know exactly what I'm going to be going over tomorrow. The news is changing so fast and so quick, and there's so much going on right now that who knows? I'm going to scan the headlines tonight and in the morning. I'll probably just get in here and talk about some current events. I'm going to try and get through the next chapter of basic economics. I know I've been working on this book for a while. I just keep getting busy and distracted, but I am 100% focused on a chapter, probably a day, moving forward and just grinding through this thing. So, because I've got other books I've got to get to, and I got to get this one done because I really am loving it. But thanks for hanging in there with me. I really do appreciate it. And as always, I will see you guys next time. If I can figure out how to end this stream here, we will be in business. Sorry if you're just joining, but 30 minutes was my goal today, and I actually hit it. So I'm pretty happy about that. So thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you next time.